The wind howled across the empty plains of Black Hollow like a warning from the dead. Dust rolled through the crooked streets, wrapping around broken wagon wheels and old hitching posts. Every window in town was shut tight before sunset. Every lantern was extinguished early, because after dark, she walked. People whispered her name like a curse. Some called her a witch. Others claimed she spoke to the dead beneath the cliffs beyond town. Children swore they had seen shadows follow her through the fog. Ranchers crossed themselves whenever her black horse passed by. And if sickness came to a home, if cattle died mysteriously, if a man vanished near the canyon, the blame always found its way back to her. Evelyn Crowe, the woman everyone feared. And the strangest thing of all, Sheriff Thomas Hale married her anyway. The entire town lost its mind the day it happened. The church bells rang once beneath a storm-filled sky while the townsfolk gathered outside in silence. No music played. No smiling faces watched from the pews. Only fear. Evelyn wore a dark grey dress instead of white. Her long black hair moved with the wind as if alive. She walked into the church alone while every eye in town followed her. Sheriff Hale stood waiting near the altar. Tall, broad-shouldered, a scar carved across his jaw from the war years ago. He was the kind of man people trusted without question. A lawman who never drank, never gambled, never lied. He had cleaned up half the outlaw gangs across the territory with nothing but grit and cold determination. And now he was marrying the woman people believed belonged to the devil. The preacher's hands shook so badly he nearly dropped the Bible. "You still have time to reconsider, Sheriff," he whispered. Thomas looked at Evelyn. She met his gaze without fear. "I already made my choice." Outside, thunder cracked across the heavens, and somewhere in the crowd, an old woman whispered, "This town is doomed." "I see." Nobody knew why Thomas Hale chose Evelyn Crowe. Some believed she bewitched him. Others thought she saved his life somehow. But the truth began months earlier, on a freezing winter night stained by blood. Sheriff Hale had been hunting the Mercer brothers gang through the northern hills. 6 killers armed with rifles and enough stolen gold to start a war. The snowstorm arrived fast, swallowing the mountains in white death. By midnight, Thomas was wounded and alone. His horse collapsed beneath him near Raven's Canyon. Then the shooting started. The Mercers found him before dawn. Thomas barely crawled behind the rocks while bullets shattered stone around his head. Blood poured from his side into the snow. He thought he would die there, until the shooting suddenly stopped. The wind fell silent. The horses began screaming. Then came the sound the outlaws would later describe with terror in their eyes. A woman singing. Soft, distant, beautiful. One outlaw fired blindly into the storm. Another shouted in panic. Then the canyon erupted into chaos. Horses bucked violently. Men screamed. Gunshots echoed through the blizzard. And through the white storm walked Evelyn Crowe, dressed entirely in black, holding only a lantern. Thomas watched one of the Mercer brothers raise his rifle toward her. Before he could fire, the outlaw's horse threw him directly into the frozen ravine below. Another man fled into the storm and vanished forever. The remaining gang members ran like frightened animals. Evelyn never chased them. She simply walked toward Thomas and knelt beside him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Snowflakes melted against her pale skin. "You're dying," she said quietly. Thomas tried reaching for his revolver. She gently pushed his hand away. "If I wanted you dead, Sheriff, I would have left you in the snow." Then she carried him home. "I see." Her cabin stood deep within the pine forests beyond Black Hollow. Most townsfolk avoided the area completely. Strange lights were sometimes seen among the trees at night. Animals refused to wander. Near the property, Thomas woke 3 days later beside a fireplace. His wounds had been cleaned and stitched perfectly. Evelyn sat near the window reading an old book. "You saved me." "You were heavy," she answered calmly. That almost made him laugh. Almost. Over the next week, Thomas recovered inside the isolated cabin while winter storms buried the world outside. Evelyn rarely spoke unless necessary. Yet the sheriff slowly realized something strange. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't evil. She wasn't anything like the stories. She fed injured wolves that wandered near the woods. She buried dead birds beneath the snow. She spoke gently to frightened horses. And every evening, she stood alone beside the cliff behind her cabin, staring toward the horizon with sadness in her eyes. One night, Thomas finally asked the question, "Why does everyone fear you?" Evelyn remained silent for a long time. Then she whispered, "Because fear is easier than truth." She told him about her mother. Years ago, sickness spread through Black Hollow. Children died. Crops failed. The townspeople grew desperate. They needed someone to blame. Evelyn's mother practiced herbal medicine. That was enough. They accused her of witchcraft. One drunken mob burned their home while Evelyn hid beneath the floorboards, listening to her mother scream. She was only 10 years old. Thomas felt sick hearing it. "She survived?" he asked quietly. Evelyn looked into the fire. "No." The cabin fell silent except for the crackling flames. "And after that," she continued, "the town decided I carried the same curse." Thomas realized then that Evelyn, Crowe, had spent her entire life alone because frightened people created monsters where none existed. Yet there was still one thing he couldn't explain. The outlaws in the canyon, the horses, the fear. "You really expect me to believe all that was coincidence?" For the first time, Evelyn smiled slightly. "What do you want me to say, Sheriff? That you're not dangerous?" She stepped closer, close enough for him to feel her breath. "I am dangerous." Then she walked away, and somehow that frightened him less than anything else. "I see." Weeks later, Thomas returned to Black Hollow. The townspeople stared at him in disbelief. Most expected him dead. Instead, he rode back beside Evelyn Crowe. The silence across town became unbearable. One rancher spat into the dirt as they passed. A woman grabbed her child and pulled him indoors. Even the deputy looked nervous. Thomas ignored them all, but gossip spread like wildfire. The sheriff had fallen under her spell. The witch owned his soul. The devil walked beside the law itself. Still, Thomas kept visiting Evelyn, again and again. Some nights, they sat silently on the cabin porch watching thunderstorms roll across the plains. Other nights, they argued for hours beside the fireplace because Evelyn trusted nobody and Thomas trusted too easily. Yet slowly, walls began falling. One evening, Thomas found her, laughing for the first time after accidentally spilling coffee across his coat. The sound stunned him, because beneath all the darkness, Evelyn Crowe had forgotten how to be happy. And Sheriff Thomas Hale became determined to change that. "I see." But evil was already coming to Black Hollow, and it wore a preacher's collar. Reverend Isaiah Boone arrived during spring. Tall, thin, cold-eyed, he claimed God sent him to cleanse the frontier towns of sin. At first, people admired him. Then they obeyed him. Boone preached fire every Sunday. He spoke of demons hiding among ordinary people. He spoke of punishment, wrath, purification, and eventually, he spoke Evelyn Crowe's name from the pulpit. "She brings death wherever she walks," he thundered before the congregation. "The devil hides behind pretty faces and soft voices." Fear spread through Black Hollow once more. Boone fed it carefully, like a man feeding dry wood into a fire. Then livestock started dying mysteriously near town. Children became sick. A ranch burned overnight, and Reverend Boone blamed Evelyn for all of it. The town believed him. Thomas didn't. But even he couldn't ignore the growing tension. Men began carrying rifles openly. Women nailed crosses above their doors. Whispers followed Evelyn everywhere. One night, Thomas found a dead crow hanging outside her cabin. Another night, someone fired bullets through her windows. Still, Evelyn refused to leave. "I spent my whole life running from cowards," she said. "I won't run anymore." Thomas looked at her beneath the lantern light. Then he made the decision that changed everything. "Marry me." She froze. Even the wind seemed to stop outside. "You don't mean that." "I do. You'd lose this town." "I never belonged to this town." Her eyes filled with emotion she tried desperately to hide. "You don't understand what happens to people close to me." Thomas stepped forward slowly. "I'm not afraid of you, Evelyn." That broke something inside her. For the first time in years, the feared woman of Black Hollow cried, "I see." The wedding happened 3 weeks later, and by sunset, Hale arrived with it. A mob gathered outside the church carrying torches and rifles. Reverend Boone stood at the front beside angry ranchers screaming curses into the storm. Thomas stepped outside with Evelyn behind him. Boone pointed directly at her. "She poisoned this town!" Thomas rested his hand near his revolver. "Go home." Boone smiled darkly. "She already controls you." The crowd shouted louder. Then someone threw a rock. It struck Evelyn across the forehead. Blood ran down her face. Thomas saw red instantly. He pulled his gun so fast nobody moved. "Next man who touches her dies." Silence crashed over the street. Rain poured harder. Boone stepped closer carefully. "You'd kill your own people." "For her." Thomas looked around at the frightened mob. "No," he said coldly. "I'd kill monsters for her." And deep inside that storm-soaked silence, something changed. Not in Evelyn, in the town, because, for the first time, somebody stood beside her instead of against her. "I see." That night Black Hollow burned, not by Evelyn's hand, by Boone's. The preacher secretly led several men to attack Evelyn's cabin while the town slept. They planned to burn her alive exactly like her mother years before. But Thomas discovered the truth in time. Gunfire exploded through the forest beneath the moonlight. Sheriff Hale fought like a man possessed. 2 attackers fell. Another fled screaming into the woods. Boone himself tried dragging Evelyn into the flames while shouting scripture like a madman. Then Evelyn finally fought back, not with magic, with rage. Years of pain erupted from her like wildfire. She stabbed Boone through the shoulder and threw him into the mud, while the burning cabin collapsed behind them. Thomas held Boone at gunpoint. The preacher laughed, despite the blood pouring from him. "She cursed this town long before I arrived." "No," Thomas growled. "You did." The remaining townsfolk finally learned the truth by dawn. Boone had poisoned livestock himself, burned ranches himself, manipulated every fear, because frightened people were easier to control. And Evelyn Crowe was only ever a lonely woman carrying scars too deep for anyone to understand. Weeks later, Black Hollow slowly changed. Not completely. Fear does not disappear overnight. But people began nodding respectfully when Evelyn passed through town. Some even thanked her quietly for saving children during a summer fever outbreak. Using her mother's old remedies, the whispers faded, the hatred weakened, and for the first time in her life, Evelyn Crowe belonged somewhere. One evening near sunset, Thomas found her standing beside the cliffs beyond town, the same place she once watched alone. He wrapped his arms around her gently. "What are you thinking about?" She looked across the endless western horizon, glowing gold beneath the dying sun. "All those years," she whispered. "I thought being feared was safer than being loved." Thomas kissed her forehead softly. "And now?" A small smile touched her lips. "Now I think love is the more dangerous thing." The sheriff laughed quietly. Below them, Black Hollow glowed peacefully in the fading light. And far across the western plains, the legend began spreading from town to town about the sheriff who married the woman everyone feared and discovered she was never the monster at all.